let's start with the clinical and pathophysiological indications. However, we should also remember that these conditions have to be corrected as well. Blue light is a situation that is well known on the market. So realistically, however, we have to know what blue light is prior to dealing with any diseases. So blue light is mostly connected with high frequency. So the photonic impact of light hits the eyes directly, and the protection that we have nowadays on all devices like PCs, tablets, smartphones is not very credible or reliable. In other words, technologies were developed and devices were developed, however, without remembering that our eyes have an important function to perform and that have to be protected against these damages. 91% of the people complain about discomfort when using digital devices. Nobody talks about this, and eye physicians do not tend to prescribe anything against this condition because glasses play a secondary role. As a researcher, however, I carried out many studies in this respect, and I must say that at the University of Bologna we are performing many tests and trials both on animals and human beings. These are statistics dating back to January 2015. As you can see, 60.8 million people use these technologies, that is the internet, Facebook, WhatsApp, etc. However, if you consider the number of hours spent with media, 4 hours, 2 hours, etc., each one of us spends at least 4 or 5 hours connected to these devices, at least every day. You see also the growth of the different networks. Let's have a look at the damage caused by blue light. First of all, we have an impact both on the eye surface, so diseases refer to the eye surface, to the lacrimal film, and the epithelium in particular, because the photonic damage occurs at this level, and epithelial cells are present both in the retina and in the lens. What does the use of these devices cause? We said 91% of the people use these devices on a daily basis. Conditions may range from red and sore eyes to headache, because sometimes we also have astigmatism and visual problems by altering the retina, the pigment epithelium, and the lacrimal film. The whole lacrimal system is changing. It is a very complex system. It is not only what we learn in books, that is the mucosal and lipid layer, but there is a real epithelium layer which is altered by blue light. Which is the social impact, however? Which are the diseases that occur? It is important to know that the most important cause for visual impairment and blindness is age-related macular degeneration. Secondly, the cataract that can be resolved through surgery. However, even if artificial crystalline lenses are UV protectors, you should also recommend that filters are used because they are less and less protected. Our lens, our crystalline lens, reduced the number of rays impacting against the retina. But if we implant a transparent crystalline, for example, there are many different types and many different modalities, of course. So if the crystalline is transparent, you get a worsening of the retina. Again, so after an cataract intervention, you have more damages. And last but not least, dry eye. Let's have a look at all the different conditions. Age-related macular degeneration that starts from 50 years of age and no longer from 60 or 70 years of age. Patients are relatively young or much younger than in the past. And why that? Due to poor nutrition, of course, that leads to these conditions, and also to poor prevention. People go to see an eye doctor much less frequently than in the past. So most of you are opticians, so you have to push your customers besides the typical eye exam that leads to the prescription of spectacles. You should also perform some prevention against eye diseases. Macular degeneration can be prevented because radiations lead to changes in the pigment epithelium at a photoreceptor level. And this is an important component. The pigment epithelium, the retinal pigment epithelium, is the scavenger. It removes all the toxins and provides for the cell turnover. It basically digests all the waste from the retina. If it is hit by blue light, it changes its physiology, and when its physiology changes, we have an increase of in situ waste, and this leads to the onset of macular degeneration, which is called age-related macular degeneration, because in the past it used to occur at a later age. Drusen appear as yellowish spots. Thermoscopically, this can be identified immediately. So in an early diagnosis setting, if you have one or two drusen, this patient is predisposed for macular degeneration, and therefore this patient has to receive proper protective measures. And then we have to distinguish between two forms of degeneration. A dry form, a sort of geographic map, and this is the most stable macular degeneration that can evolve to a vascular form. New vessels are generated from the underlying choroid, and this leads to retinal degeneration. It basically alters and changes the pathological conditions, and new vessels continue to be generated, and therefore we have to intervene surgically. There are drugs nowadays that allow to stabilize the disease. To stabilize the disease, the exudative part has to be removed. And once the exudative component is removed, we have an atrophic form with a fixed scotoma. However, from a rehabilitation perspective, patients can be more easily treated compared to patients suffering from the neovascular form that cannot be rehabilitated properly. So patients note distortions of the images, and in the end stages, as I said, in the evolutionary stages, in the atrophic stages, they will note a scotoma in the middle. Clearly, as I said, the rays impact the retina, but prior to hitting the retina, they reach the crystalline lens. The crystalline lens is covered with a capsule which is made of epithelium. So the radiations hit the crystalline capsule, and then there is the nucleus of the crystalline. When we perform surgery in cataract, we remove part of the capsule, we keep the nucleus and the posterior part of the capsule. In this case, any metabolic changes caused by blue light involve the whole system, not only the epithelial part, but also the nucleus. Well, basically, we have a filter there, and if we provide a new filter, we avoid worsening the conditions related to cataract. Of course, there is a whole philosophy behind this, so research on blue control is only at the beginning. In the beginning, so what I'm saying is correct. However, there are many gray zones also for us as researchers. We are still investigating up to which extent the blue light can worsen these conditions. To safeguard the eyes, it is important to avoid photooxidation. We have to try and remove photooxidation. In our body, we already have some systems that prevent oxidation. So we also have antioxidant mechanisms. So we have enzymatic systems that allow to avoid pathological conditions. But once this obstacle is overcome, the disease occurs. Again, as far as the crystalline is concerned, we can have mild to highly evolved cataract. This is an example of a highly evolved cataract, but we also have other forms of cataract, end-stage cataract, that no longer occur nowadays. The cataract should be operated beforehand, avoiding those end stages. Thanks to modern laser techniques, we can operate in a matter of a few minutes compared to 20 or 30 years ago. As far as cataract symptoms are concerned, they are varied. They are subjective and described by the patients in different ways. However, so there is certainly a reduction in visual acuity. So the patient may become myopic or hyperopic, changes in the chromatic sense, and monocular diplopia and glare, especially during daytime, or the appearance of a positive scotoma in the visual field. Moving on, so from the posterior part to the superficial part of the eye, also the lacrimal film is hit by the radiations, especially by blue light, and this leads to osmolar changes in the film, as many studies confirm in literature. And so the lacrimal functional unit is a component including so many other elements. And also the outflow system is important. If the outflow is closed, this changes the lacrimal film as well. These are the different layers. So we have the external lipidic layer, the serum layer, and what we very often have is an evaporation and instability of the lacrimal film. We have an inflammatory response, of course, that generates an increased cellular stratification and abnormal differentiation, a reduced expression of mucin, and a serious inflammatory response. Here you see many different indications for dry eye specified by the International Society. However, one part of it is due to inflammatory caused by poor protection systems. Symptoms are the usual ones, dryness, feeling of weight and pain, visus conditions. So then difficulties, pain at night, etc. Difficulty to open the eyes in the morning. There are also some microbiological changes. Not only are the cellular components altered, but also other elements that lead to conjunctivitis, for example. In summer, if no sun protection is used, we increase the occurrence of these situations. Another important thing is the following. We should never use smartphones in bed. So this is very serious because we also change melatonin metabolism that allow us to fall asleep. Another important thing I would like to point out is that, well, this is a trial that we're currently carrying out at the University of Bologna with a new device, MPS2. So this allows to assess the photopigments. We are performing some studies about blue light filtering with and without treatment. And we have actually pointed out an increase in photopigments in patients using filters. This is the last slide. Thank you very much for your attention. Next week there is we have low vision and visual rehabilitation course in Ascoli. Thank you very much.
Dr. Scalinci is a doctor that helps opticians because he brings to light problems, and when I tried to bring them to light during a medical conference, I had to escape. I represented a minority. So thank you so much, Dr. Scalinci, for your contribution. And I will be dealing with a completely different theme. I will try and identify present techniques and what can be done to be protected against this situation. First and foremost, blue light. Blue light is wider than you think, even if actually we speak about blue light when instead we should speak about indigo, purple, indigo and blue. And indigo is the most important part from 425 to 486, and it's an area companies are focused on to give their best to limit damage. And I have made some calculations. You have skeptics that think that blue light has been invented by companies just to sell something different. And I wanted to calculate the energy content of high energy visible HEV. If you see such numbers, 3.26, 2.51, it's energy, electron volt. If you consider a CH bond, which is an organic bond, it should be split down for values of 3.49 electrovolt, and so it's a high risk area. So what blue light does, apart from causing diseases, blue light reduces contrast, and glare and lack of focus oblige your eye to focus with tiredness of the eye that can be summarized with the situations you see represented here. So, it is scientifically proven. The band goes from 415 to 455 with a maximum of 435. There's also a band, as the previous speaker said, a chronobiological band that we have to preserve because some way or other it regulates so many cycles, the hormone cycles, pupil reflex, cognitive functions, movement, stability. You have so many situations. And companies will have to make an effort to try and protect some wavelengths and reduce other wavelengths. I do not get into such details. However, what radiation is useful for and the damage shown by Dr. Scalinci. I will try and get to technical details now. What's the technical detail? In a scotopic vision, we start from 400 and we get to 600 nanometers. In photopic vision instead, sorry, I have to go back. So what do we see? We see that we have the highest sensitivity in photopic vision at 555, and I'd like to show you, with regard to the response of our eye, the electronic devices we've just talked about. Light source should be controlled, and light source issues high quantities of blue. But getting to the specific point, this slide shows you the curve of response of our eye from 420 to 700 approximately, and we see that peaks of smartphones, video games, personal computers are below. And it's energy that gets to the eye without having a specific function in a way. And some peaks in other situations are outside of our response curve. This has been seen, we're not interested in this. And an important aspect that was not dealt with, and we have spoken about retina-related problems, and here you have a wonderful slide, and it shows how retinic sensitivity decreases when you have higher wavelengths, and toxicity at the level of the retina has a peak at around 400, from 435 to 455. We have a peak of sensitivity and a peak of toxicity at the level of the retina. So what should we know to try and disentangle this host of proposals? It should be clear that a lens can just be analyzed if we analyze a transmittance diagram. A transmittance diagram gives us the transmittance of that specific lens or polymer when wavelength varies. If we consider a common lens, I analyze the various types of lenses, I give you positive news. And all serious companies and all the lenses on the market, all of them cut up to 400 nanometers. When you give lens, for sure, you protect the person against UV. When you give sun lenses, you do not think you protect him more if the polymer is a polymer that cuts at 400, the lens is with a cut at 400, and it means lowering transmittance diagram, but protection for low wavelength is unaltered. So on the market today, and you heard about it, and all companies mention it, you have high optical protection materials. And what are such materials? And here I show you the difference between high optical protection materials and the effect of blue control. It's two completely different concepts, and there's a lot of confusion about it, and I'd like to give my contribution. High optical protection material, if you consider the spectrum of blue, and if you have our previous lens, we see that a high optical protection lens is a lens that shifts the curve. It shifts the curve, and the curve progresses. And if we make a selection of energy contribution of radiation from 400 to 420, we have a 95% mitigation. When you use a high protection material, you don't just eliminate UV radiation, but some way or other you also eliminate radiation that are potentially energetic, and we limit them to get to 420. When we use blue control instead, you act on peaks of emissions of the devices we've just seen. And for example, blue control treatment, blue control coating has an impact on the top part. You might say, why instead of 420 don't we get to 440? And why doesn't blue control coating reduce the number of radiation that goes through? And the lens would not be white. I don't know if you've realized, but lenses are slightly tinted. If we want to eliminate every type of radiation, well, at that point, we should use a eye disease lens, and you can have the desired reduction based on the pigment with which you treat the product, you coat the product. And I'd like to get to my conclusions by showing you that a high optical protection lens has the aim to shift the curve from 400 to 420. Emissions up to 420 have a high quantity of energy, and I do hope that in the future all lenses will have a high optical protection. Blue control coating instead. So sorry, I have to go back. Blue control coating carries out its action by partially reducing radiations between 400 and 420, but especially it mitigates the peaks of emissions of the devices, electronic devices we've just seen. And it's two other important phenomena. For your knowledge, you also have medical lens for eye diseases. And this is 480, but you might get to 500. And this lens is orange, not suitable for driving, and it may cause many other problems. And I'd like to get at this point to some indications. First of all, Scalinci said it, who should use such lenses? Patients with cataract, the elderly, and also those patients who received a diagnosis of senile macular degeneration, and all children that sit in front of electronic devices. If you spend a lot of time in front of electronic devices, And such treatments should be applied to all lenses. And I'd like to give you some data, and you have references at the bottom here. It says that 70% and even more of blue light reaches the retina of children. Approximately 80% of sun exposure occurs in the first 25 years of our life. In an Australian study, and it's quite alarming, 81% of people analyzed from 12 to 15 years of age had eye damage induced by exposure to sunlight. Conclusion. Natural blue light transports a lot of energy in low wavelengths, and using a high protection product, what does it do? It cuts that radiation from 400 to 420, which is quite harmful for the youth that have more transparent crystalline lens. And as a consequence, damage gets to deeper structures. For all the devices we've seen, LED, plasma television, and so on and so forth, you have between 435 to 455, and such radiation contains a big quantity of energy. We cannot reduce them completely, otherwise you cannot drive and so on and so forth, but they should be strongly selected. So I believe that this task will have to be solved by companies. Thank you so much.
Buongiorno a tutti, sono Manola Stefanelli.
Good morning, my name is Manola Stefanelli, and I'm specialized with tear film stabilization. My colleagues explored the different radiations that we have on Earth, and every day we are exposed 12 hours a day to daylight, so night light. But these are not only the radiations, well, not only are the daytime radiation harmful for our eyes, we have seen that the most serious damage is caused to children and young people. We usually focus on the elderly because our population is aging. In this case, instead, children and young people are the most exposed individuals. So due to the life we have, blue light does not only come from the sun, 25 to 30% of the visible spectrum, but also due to the change in the type of lighting. You may wonder why we are so interested in blue light nowadays. So why blue light today and not 25 or 30 years ago? Well, unfortunately, this is due to the greenhouse effect. This is due to the hole in the ozone layer. All topics that we have analyzed very much in detail. The use of CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, and with new industrial technologies, we use plenty of chlorofluorocarbons in our everyday life. It's true, this amount can be reduced in cement plants and in many other companies. We can also provide our own personal contribution by limiting sprays and perfumes because CFCs are emitted by many systems that we use on a daily basis, like hairsprays or perfumes. Chlorofluorocarbons create oxides and generate the so-called hole in the ozone layer, thus leading to greenhouse effect. So that's the reason why we talk about blue light today, because today we have these radiations that are increasing on a constant basis. In the past, the ozone, the atmosphere itself, protected us against UVA and UVB rays. Due to climate change, however, we are suffering from new types of radiations that did not exist in the past. I would like to focus on a very important element. So what allows these radiations to reach our brain? Well, the eye. All these radiations lead to many changes to our organisms, like cancer, for example. It is through our eyes that these radiations reach our brain. Many studies are underway to study how Parkinson's disease and other conditions can be stimulated or accelerated by this type of light. So these diseases are not directly caused by this light. There are many other cofactors. However, blue light can anticipate the onset of this disease. Many studies are underway on Parkinson's disease, for example. And these radiations get into our body through our eyes, through the retina, and therefore we have to protect our eyes. We talked about protection through ophthalmic lenses. I would like to focus on protection through contact lenses. Contact lenses that can also protect us from reflected radiations. Damage caused by reflected radiations can be even more serious than direct radiation. We have a new protection now, a new device that allows us to protect not only the cornea and the pupil but also the pupil from direct and reflected radiations. This, of course, can also be done with many ophthalmic lenses. Contact lenses, however, are a very important device. Italians are not very much used at using contact lenses, but there are many different solutions, beauty contact lenses, corrective lenses, for example. With contact lenses, we can correct myopia, presbyopia, hypermetropy, keratocone, and orthokeratology. They are available in many different materials, cutting-edge materials like biphasic, hybrid, and gas-permeable materials. Cutting-edge polymers, for instance, that are very difficult to assess in terms of quality differences between and among various polymers. We have also many different types of use, daily use, weekly use. In the field of contact lenses, we have provided for corrective solutions, but also protection and prevention are important. Protection against UV light, of course, but also against the HEV light, against the blue light which reaches the Earth more and more frequently. In the future, we will be supported by evolution. We will also change the function of our photoreceptors through our evolution. A fourth cone, for example, has just been discovered in women. And we have some gene transmissions on chromosome. So in women we have 2 X's, and for this reason we have a very fast genetic transmission and also changes in the eye area. These changes, however, will occur in the long term. So we have to protect ourselves against these radiations that are increasingly frequent in our daily life. Contact lenses can support us in protecting ourselves against blue light. There are already soft contact lenses with different percentages of hydration that protect against HEV light, against the blue light, with great contrast against dehydration. And there are also many different diameters ranging from 11.5 to 16.5. Children can also be protected with contact lenses, but also adults can use protective contact lenses. We have additions to 0.5 to 4 diopters with 0.25 increments. This means that we can also correct presbyopia very well, protecting eyes at the same time. So we are referring to children and adults that can be protected with contact lenses. Again, they are used not only for correction purposes, but also for prevention and protection, both in children and in adults. And contact lenses can be customized based on many different parameters. In the next future, when contact lenses will be provided with microchips, we can already think about protecting children and adults and preventing major diseases in a very easy way, as the previous speaker illustrated. Contact lenses can also stabilize the tear film, for example. There are companies who offer high quality care and treatment solutions, and also products that allow to stabilize the tear film, not only for contact lenses but also for ophthalmic lenses. So stabilizing the tear film means improving vision. The stabilization of lacrimal film can be obtained also through contact lenses, and additionally correction, protection and prevention can occur through contact lenses that in Italy unfortunately are not yet properly offered by your category, especially as far as protection is concerned.
Vorrei fare una precisazione.
Now, a specification. When I spoke about the point before, I meant controlling by surface treatment the light emission of blue emission of such devices. I didn't want to mention the specific name of the company.
Buongiorno a tutti, Fabio Briganti.
Good afternoon, everybody. Fabio Briganti. We've seen that electromagnetic radiation represent a transfer of energy, and for sure they have a specific frequency and also specific wavelength, as wavelength and frequency are inversely proportional. The less the wavelength of a radiation, the higher the energy of a photon. And starting from the end of the 19th century, artificial lighting was obtained by incandescence lamps, and a metal element was overheated. Since 2009, the European Commission has banned this way of lighting, and today for the inside and the outside, LED technology is gaining ground, and it has some important features. First of all, high radiance, lower costs of production, and as you can see, in terms of its curve, it has an important element in terms of blue. Consider that most digital devices, be they iPads, iPhones, tablets, LCD screens, they have the same peak of emission, approximately 440, 450 nanometers. So, LED backlighting might create an effect of glare, and this glare doesn't inhibit vision, but it creates some asthenopic symptoms, just like eye dryness, eye tiring, and it can worsen the quality of vision, especially in the youth, because the youth use digital devices the most. If we then consider the curve, if we thought in terms of wavelength, blue is identified before the retina, and apart from hypothetical photochemical damage in terms of the retina, the problem that we have today is connected to diffundance, which is created inside our visual system, and with a dominance of light blue. What's the DICE answer to this? A specific treatment, Gira Vision Blue Protector, it reflects blue light near 440 nanometers, and blue light goes through because it is important for our biological cycle, circadian cycle. Another aspect has to do with the requirements of consumers. If the primary requirement is protection indoors, surface coating can reflect part of the blue line generated by electronic devices, but if you work outdoors, you need selective tinting that can cut the blue light produced by the sunlight, while photochromatic photofusion lenses with blue protect coating is the best solution for indoors and outdoors. Thanks a lot.
Buongiorno a tutti, Silvano.
Good morning, everybody. Silvano Larcher. Hoya. And as the theme is complex, I will be dealing with certain themes already dealt with by previous colleagues, and so I shall be quite fast. If we consider the spectrum we're interested in terms of blue light and how it interacts visually, we have sensitivity curves that vary depending on high lighting, low lighting. But curve of sensitivity of our retina cells at a circadian rhythm is different than in other cases. Set of research, and fortunately research is following this direction, and you have a host of research. So research shows fundamental aspects I'd like to stress with you today. Blue light, as was said before, cannot be generalized. Depending on the wavelength, it has different impacts. For example, digital devices have a peak of emission of a certain kind. The sensitivity of our system of closing and opening of the pupil between 430 and 450. Macular degeneration connected to age is in the area of 440, and sensitivity, maximum absorption of macular lutea between 459 and 480. So blue light is quite general, but then it should be defined specifically depending on the type of product. I want to choose. And companies should get well equipped to provide specific solutions. Whatever I do has an impact in terms of the aesthetics of the product, but also in terms of visual function. And I cannot simply cut and reduce. But what has changed in our habits vis-à-vis the past? Our way of interacting with the external world has changed, and also what we use basically during the day. And Hoya has focused on the digital element. We said that 445, 455 are the peak of emission of digital devices. And in terms of radiation, it has altered our habits. Blue Control is a trade name, is a Hoya's anti-reflective system for digital devices, and it has a response modulation based on the quantity of light you get. If you want to get to a higher protection, also for the outdoors, at Middle we are launching a photochromatic version with a slight anti-reflective blue coating, and green also, because green has a yellow component and a higher absorption of the blue part of the radiation. If you see how this product works, and you see it in yellow. In yellow you have the band from 430 to 480. The red curve is the lens in the condition of maximum clearing, and you have always a minimum protection of 20%. In the area of strong luminosity you get to 90% protection. To give you an idea of what we have talked about, if we compared this type of product to a Blue Control lens, not completely protective, up to 400 nanometers, the lens with the Blue Control coating is in the same band of emission we have talked about, but with a lower protection, because it starts from a basic protection which is lower, and it hasn't photochromatism. If we then see a lens with a cut at 400 nanometers, it has a peak that is closer to UV. Indications of use are outdoors or sensitivity for glare at night, but in the case of digital devices its efficacy is reduced, provided it is associated with an anti-reflective coating. This is a very simple method to empirically understand, and it's so effective to understand how much a lens protects against digital devices, and in a way it is what is done by Apple when they launched the Night Shift app. Apple has an app, and at night you can have a reduction of blue light. How does it happen? Remodulation of the emission, and the screen seems more yellow. You can reduce blue, and yellow increases. And with the same principle, if you check a lens with a cut at 420 nanometers and a lens with a lower cut for UV outdoors, the two lenses seem to be the same, but if you put them on an electric device, one is more yellow, because yellow is the reference color when I remove blue from the emission. Thank you so much.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good afternoon, Roberto Tripoli for SIOO Italy. Our contribution in terms of information regards our research on blue light and on new solutions. When we talk about research and development in the world, we refer to many investments and collaborations with different institutions like Institut de la Vision from Paris, which is one of the leading institutions specialized in research on photoprotection. For Essilor, innovating means correction, protection, and prevention. So what have we found? A very important discovery. In 2011, the Institut de la Vision already identified the wavelengths that led to retinal cell death. As you can see in the chart, it is these are the frequency peaks where retinal cell death occurs, and you see that it ranges between 415 and 455 nanometers, with a peak at 435 nanometers. A first in vitro test was performed on ophthalmic lenses to prove the efficacy of this new filtering system in terms of reducing retinal cell mortality. I will start from the very last research that we carried out, the best balance between cutting-edge protection and aesthetics. Eye Protector system is the name of this last solution, a solution that allows us to protect against the harmful effects of UV rays and blue light integrated in an aesthetic and transparent lens. Specific molecules were developed that are able to absorb the harmful effects of light. So these molecules were selected based on their efficacy in absorbing the harmful violet and blue light, selected in terms of their ability to transmit the essential blue turquoise light, their stability, and the transmission of the remaining visible light. This system is a protection system in the core of the lens. It is not an anti-glare system. As you can see in the chart, we have a very sophisticated curve that works exactly in the frequency range, which is the most harmful one. And we also performed in vitro tests providing this very evidence to us. This system is used to systematically protect ourselves in any situations. So the idea is that to combine aesthetics with efficacy by preventing and protecting against retinal cell death. This can be complemented with an anti-glare system, and this is Crisol Prevencia. This is the very first scientific discovery, and this enhanced protection is indicated for those who use digital devices, of course, but also for photosensitive patients in particular. This is a merger or a synergy between protection and absorption. So it is possible to absorb up to 32%, to filter up to 32% of the blue and purple light, thus reducing retinal cell mortality by 35%. Three main benefits for the wearer in terms of prevention, quality, and protection. Here you see another frontier that we face with two further products. So Crisol Transitions, these are photochromatic lenses. Thanks to the transitions of photochromatic technology combined with Crisol, you obtain the same benefits as Eye Protect system. The signature solution reduces by 20% the blue-purple light inside and up to 85% of the blue-purple light outside. The extractive that becomes dark also when you drive due to the particular features of the pigment increases the reduction of harmful radiations by 34 inside and 88 to 95% outside. So here we have a new combination, transitions extractive plus creasel prevention, so this anti-glare treatment. A dedicated study was performed in collaboration with the San Paolo Hospital in Milan and with local institution. In this clinical study, the objective was to reduce glare and increase visual acuity and sensitivity against sensitivity to contrast in patients suffering from retinal degenerations. Conclusions: an increase in visual acuity, an increase in sensitivity to contrast, a reduction in glare, and thanks to this photochromatic technology, we can widen the peak of selectivity for harmful radiations, and these solutions are indicated for patients suffering from age-related macular degeneration, retinopathies, and retinal dystrophies. This is the poster session, and this study will be published during the Vision 2017 Congress that will be held in The Hague in June. In conclusion, photoselectivity against blue light. We've talked about cutting-edge technology. In our case, this technology is Protect with a highly transparent solutions and dedicated solutions for patients suffering from pre-retinal conditions, but we also have photosensitive solutions for them. Thank you very much for your attention. We think it is absolutely interesting to think that Essilor is the right partner for innovation.
Abbiamo ancora 3 minuti.
We have 3 minutes left if you have any questions. If you have any questions to the speakers, we have 3 minutes time. Was everything clear? Good. So we can break for lunch for those who haven't had lunch yet. Thank you very much and see you next year at Midos 2018.